Hello, this is Nikki in Niagara coming to you from Niagara Falls, Canada. Today I am going to talk to you about the coloring book, about the books that I read in October 2021. And while I do so, I will be coloring. I will be coloring out of this color by number book called Stained Glass Christmas by Sachdeva. The picture that I'll be coloring today is this one right here. And I will be using the shuttle art markers, which are the long skinny ones. Now some of these do yellow, so I put a piece of parchment behind the picture when I'm finished. Right now I have blotter sheets there. Not all the colors do, just some. And so, let's get started with the book. The first book that I read in October was The Other Girl by Erica Spindler. And I have to tell you that I absolutely do not remember anything about this book at all. I gave it a 3, and I'm going to read my note that I put here since I can't remember. So anyways, guys, I am using my new reading journal. Picked this up in September, and I started using it at the beginning of October, so we'll see if this turns out to be a great way to do these books read. Reading Wrap-Up, I believe it's called. So, The Other Girl by Erica Spindler. Melinda is an upstanding cop who wasn't always on the right side of the tracks. After an incident in which she is sent to juvie, she changed her life around. With the murder of a prominent townsman's son, she finds the past rushing up to meet her. She must find out what's going on before she is arrested for his murder. An okay book. And even reading that synopsis does not bring anything back to mind. I do remember that I read it, but anyways, it's an okay book, so, you know, if that synopsis sounded good to you, it's not a waste of time to read it. When I give something 3 stars, that basically means that it's worth your while to read. Anything lower than that, and I do not recommend reading it at all. So the next book that I read was The Mother-in-Law by, let me find it first. We have a look at the cover. Really nice cover. I read this on Kindle. So The Mother-in-Law is about this couple who gets married, and starting on their honeymoon, the mother-in-law becomes a problem. First of all, and this all happens right away, so it's not a spoiler. The day that they're going on sail for their trip, I forget where they were going for their honeymoon, mother-in-law calls and says that the father is dying and they had better get there right away. So they do that. And then the son stays with the mother and never leaves until finally the mother-in-law comes to visit them instead of him staying there with her to help her get over the death of her husband. And from there begins the story of the most evil mother-in-law in creation. I just read straight through this book, like did not put it down until I was finished. Let's see what I wrote. Starting off with the quick romance of our 2 protagonists. Yeah, so it does start with the 2 of them romancing. That takes up probably the first chapter. The honeymoon is over fast. Then Lauren's mother-in-law comes to visit after the death of her husband. Can I just say wow? I stayed up all night to finish this in one sitting. The plot went places I never dreamed. The ending totally caught me off guard. A fantastic thriller. So highly recommend this. I am just loving reading Kirsten Modglin. She writes novellas, and they are just absolutely fantastic. Each one I read seems to be better than the other. Well, some are worse or better than others are, but you know what I mean. Let's look up the next book here. So the next book that I read was The Visitors by Katherine Burns. And, oh, I gave Mother-in-Law 5 stars. I think you could tell that. So this is The Visitors by Katherine Burns. And I gave it a 3, but the more time that has gone by, the more I have thought about this book. So it may just possibly be a 4 rather than a 3. So anyways, this mentally challenged woman lives with her brother, and they're around in their early 40s, I would guess, with the brother being the eldest. So they live in the house in which they grew up in, and after the father dies, I should say after the mother dies, so then it's just the two of them. The brother starts to keep visitors in the basement, and he says that they are there for him to teach them how to behave properly. They're young girls that he keeps in the basement. Now, the Marion, that's the name of our main protagonist, and she knows about them. He talks to her about them, calling them the visitors, and she knows that, and she behaves. We don't really know. She behaves as if she really truly does believe that the girls are being taught. She kind of imagines that there's a blackboard down there and that he's like teaching them at desks and that kind of thing. That's what she's got into her mind about this. But obviously that's not what he's doing. And so we get the perspective of the Marion, and then we also get I can't remember now if we got the perspective of the brother or if it just went to third person. But we were told what was going on down in the basement at, not a lot, but enough so that we knew what was going on. And so anyways, she's not allowed to enter the basement, and she doesn't. She does not enter it. And from there is where our story goes along. I wouldn't call this a thriller. It is, it just really tells this story about, how we've all read about captives or seen it on the news, and that, they're alive. They're being held captives, and they're still alive. So we've read about that stuff, and you kind of wonder about the people who are living in the house, why they don't know what's going on in the basement, or the garage, or the man cave, or wherever it is that the man is keeping the women. And this kind of showcases the story from the perspective of one of an imaginary person who does live in the house, and what they know and what they don't know. So it just tells us that story, and then naturally progresses to a suitable ending, as how the natural, shall we say, natural ending of such a situation. So I rated it a 3, but I have to tell you, even now, just talking over it, I would change that to a 4. because I really did enjoy the book. I think one of the reasons that I gave it a 3 is that it's not a thriller. It's marketed as a thriller, but it's not a thriller at all. There's no mystery. There's no thriller thrillerish stuff going on. So let's read what I put down. Not what I had expected, not a thriller at all. Follows the life of Marion, a naive, childlike woman who is mentally challenged. Her brother keeps kidnapped women in the basement, which she is never allowed to enter, but she knows. I enjoyed the book, but it's one of those ones where nothing really happens. Instead, it's a study of Marion's character before, during, and after this kidnapping of the women. So yeah, I do really recommend that one. So the next book I read, if I don't show you a physical book, I read it on Kindle. So the next book that I read is John Dies at the End by David Wong. David Wong is actually the name of a character in here, and this is supposed to be his telling of his story. The author's real name is somewhere tiny. Oh, here we go. Jason Pargin, who is a National Lampoon contributor and editor-in-chief of Cracked.com. So he's a humorist, and you can tell this book is absolutely hilarious. It is an almost Armageddon type of story. But it's just, like I said, it's just absolutely hilarious what goes on. And John does die, even though he is a main character in the book. You'll just have to see how that works, because he is in the second book. So yeah, you'll have to find out how that happens. So it's really hard to describe this book because it's just a series of events that just continues and continues. And the humor is, it's kind of like slapstick humor, but it's irreverent and just like absolutely hilarious. Even though it's irreverent, I don't think that it's the type of humor that anybody would find insulting. But yeah, I recommend it. I gave this a 4. I'll just read what I put here. This book is all action. The plot goes from one action scene to another, dropping plot points along the way. Very funny, though a bit much with the swearing. So yeah, it's very sweary. I loved the book, but it was too long, going just that bit over every time. Hard to give a summary, but does involve lots of monsters who must be killed. So that bit about it being overly long is that it just seemed like each situation that gets set up in its sort of like slapstick conclusion, it just goes that little bit further where you're like, oh, that was great, funny, hilarious, haha, let's go. But it keeps going for just that little bit more, and you're kind of like, okay, we're done with this. Let's go. That's why I gave it a 4 instead of a 5. I have already hauled the next book in the series, and I own the third one. So I owned the first one and the third one somehow, but I had to buy the second one because I do intend on finishing the series. I really liked it. So the next book I read that I like, so here we go. We Have Always Lived in the Castle. So this is a story that this is a story about family being not stuck, but they live in a rundown house that's been in the family for generations. What am I doing? I'm supposed to be using green. What happened to it? There it is. And I'm doing 8s. Almost colored the wrong thing. So yeah, I thought I had read this before, but if I did, it must have been a very long time ago because everything seemed fresh and new to me as I was reading it, so there's a chance that I didn't read it. So what I wrote down is 2 sisters and a wheelchair-bound uncle live in a generational house. The rest of the family was murdered with arsenic at dinner 6 years ago. The eldest sister was indicted but was found not guilty. So that's the premise of the story, and it continues on there with their lives continually going on, and how they have to live in, because they still live in the same house, and how they manage to live in the same place, and how they're treated in the town, and how this has affected both, or all 3 of their lives have been affected personally, mentally, with the eldest sister's situation of being found not guilty. And it must be a horrible way to live, to have been found not guilty, which, a lot of people take as meaning innocent. So if you're innocent and you were put on trial, nobody's ever going to believe that you really were innocent. Well, I mean, some people will, like they should, but there's always that amount of people who are just going to be wary of you ever since. So this has an absolutely fantastic atmosphere. It's a prime example of the Gothic novel. And yeah, it was just atmospheric. I absolutely love books which take place in a generational house, and I also like family stories where there's several quirky characters in a family, and what goes on between them. I love those kind of stories. So yeah, every character I loved in this, and that just makes it so much more fun when you love the characters. And this book really does deserve to be called a classic, as it is. So the next book that I read is a graphic novel edition of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I'm rereading a lot of my graphic novels and manga to see if they're worthy of staying on the shelf. And this is just your basic rendition of the Jekyll and Hyde story. It stays true to form, but the selling point of this book is the illustration. I mean, look at that front cover. Isn't that amazing? And that's what the book is like inside. We just have these black and white illustrations, which are fantastic. And that is why I'm keeping this book, because I love the illustrations. And so, for a quick sampling of the story, this is excellent. As a piece of art, this is excellent. And I don't think I wrote this one down. No, I didn't write this one down in my book, because basically, to me, this is a piece of art. So I like graphic novel versions of classic stories, because it's just another way to experience the story. I always make sure I've read the story first before I get a graphic novel or look at a graphic novel version of it. And it's another way to experience the story. You experience the story in text when you originally read the book. You've probably experienced the story in the moving format, watching it in a film, so the film version. And to read a graphic novel is to read the story again in shortened shortened graphic novel or comic format if you wish. So yeah, highly recommend that for the art. Where am I putting my books? Then the next book that I read is We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. It's a 3, and it's not immediately coming to mind what this is about. So it says that this one is going to be, or is, a movie. It was published in 21. No, it's just been published, so we don't know when that's going to happen. I'm going to read what I wrote down here first to help me remember it. There is a tornado warning in Texas, and this family of 4, mother, husband, daughter, son, oh, yeah, I remember it now. They go into the bathroom, and they hide out in the bathroom. This is typical of what they do whenever there's a tornado warning. They all grab a blanket and a pillow and file in to the bathroom. Now this is a small bathroom. It just fits the 4 of them, lets them be able to sit down with one person sitting on the toilet and one person in the bathtub. It makes room for them all. And so they stay there, and at some point they try to get out. I guess they figure the tornadoes, oh well, I guess they could hear the tornado being finished. Just let me get my next color out here. I need dark green, so I'm going to use 50. And this is number 7. So at some point they will have heard that the tornado is over, and they go to open the door and it's stuck. There's a tree behind that's broken into their house and fallen right in front of the bathroom door. Now they can get it open a smidge, but the youngest person in the family is the son, and he's like, I don't know, 8 or 9 or something like that. And he can't fit through, even with like trying at the utmost to get out. He can't do that. And so they stay there, and that's like, we get the internalizing of all the characters and what they're actually doing in the bathroom. And let's just say that it does really, really, really becomes an issue with 1 or 2 of the people, and their patience and survival instincts are not exactly that well rooted, shall we say. So yeah, let me read what I've written about where we go from there. There is a tornado warning in Texas. Okay, I read that already. They file into the bathroom. They get stuck in there, and the story commences. A good premise and quite readable, but has quite a few plot issues. Mostly an added love story, which is necessary for the plot, but would have been better without. Recommended if you like weird fiction. And so yeah, that's definitely what we're going to call this, is weird fiction. So if you're a fan of weird fiction, then yeah, go for it. It's a good story, and has a like brilliant ending to it, which leaves you thinking. So yeah, there is a love story that goes on with the daughter, who is remembering back to what just recently happened with her and this girl that she's in love with. And it kind of like didn't need to be there. They made it into it being a plot point, and I think it would have been better if if it hadn't been the love story. Okay, like, first of all, I hate romances, and I hate it when romance comes into my thrillers and horror and weird fiction. I don't like romance stories at all. So yeah, that's my personal issue with it. But I also think that they could have had the same conclusion without having to spend the time on the romance. You know, like if they'd just been friends, it would have eliminated the sort of like out of plot ramblings of the love story, if you get what I'm saying about that. So yeah, I do highly recommend it. I think it deserves more than the 3 that I gave it after reading it. So the next book I read was Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lorena. A wealthy family has the grown children visit for Easter Sunday. So you probably recognize this cover. This book has been around the booktube community. So all the grown-up children come to this house for dinner. They're wealthy, at least the parents are. And just as you would expect, things get out of hand. Later that night, the parents, both the husband and the wife, are murdered. And then we have the story. That all happens right away, so that's not plot. That's not giving anything away. So the story starts now, and the case centers around which one of the kids killed their parents. Now, they don't necessarily believe that only the children one of the children could have killed the parents, but that's basically what the kids are each thinking is, you know, which one of them killed the parents. And the whole case goes over what happened that night, and they all have secrets. And then there is a surprise ending, which I just really loved. And I really enjoyed it. It's, you know, I can't tell you too much because it's one of those books that, you know, after you get the initial synopsis, the parents are murdered, and then the book begins sort of like a mystery. Well, it is a thriller. It's a domestic thriller. So then our mystery starts, and we get thrills along the way. And I really, really enjoyed the surprise ending. It was worth the read, and I gave this 5 stars. Now, the next book that I read is Lying Next to Me by Greg Olson. So there's the cover of Lying Next to Me. And I'm going to read this. I gave it 5 stars, but I'm a little iffy on what the story is. A wealthy couple and their 3-year-old daughter take a vacation in one of 3 1920s cabins by a beach. One morning, while out in a boat with his daughter, Adam sees a man rush out, beat his wife, so she's sitting on the beach, and this man comes out, and he grabs her, and he beats her, and then he drags her off the beach into a car and drives away. In the meantime, Adam is like rowing as fast as he possibly can to get the boat to the shore. He's got a 3-year-old kid in there with him, so he can't just abandon it. And by the time he gets to the beach, the car has gone and taken off. So the book centers around the search for his wife's, whoever took the wife. And again, this is another domestic thriller. It's told in several points of view. We get Adam's point of view. Let me pick another color here to go on with. Let's do... Oh, you know what? I'm not filling in the center. I better do that too. So what did we do? I did 6 first. That is yellow. So let's see if there's any 6s in here. Yeah, we got the stars on the tree. And that's it. So we get different points of view. We get Adam's point of view, we get a neighbor's point of view, and the police detectives' voices. And this was quite a fast read. Actually, it was a really fast read because it was just so tense, and there was lots of things going on, I should say. So anyways, I read this in one day, staying up late, just to find out who the perpetrator was. And I didn't guess what was going on until just before the reveal. I clicked in to what was happening, and it was absolutely an amazing finish. Really good book if you like domestic thrillers. So let's do, the first one was green, that was 8. Okay, so we got the tree. Okay, so I just have the tree, which is 8s. So the next book that I read is Helltown by Jeremy Bates. Now at this point, I started reading a whole bunch of Jeremy Bates books. Well, actually I read his novellas. This first one is the longest of them. And these are all thrillers. We have Helltown here, which is a real place. It's an area of, I can't remember what town. Let me find where this one's written down. I know I wrote it down. Here we are. Okay, so I thoroughly enjoyed this. It reminded me a lot of that episode, which is one of my favorites, and it's a very popular one, episode of X-Files, where they have the really weird family, and at the end of the show they find the mother under the bed, and I believe she doesn't have any arms or legs. But yeah, if you know that episode, this really gave me vibes for that. So let me read what I wrote down. A group of post-college kids decide to take a road trip around Helltown for Halloween night. They end up being chased by a bunch of creepy, degenerate, and mentally off-balance family and their friends who want the girls for their black masses. This is an ingenious replication of an 80s horror book. It read exactly like an 80s horror book to me, where it was just all fast action, crazy stuff going on, weirdo people, and all that stuff. Everything you could want is here. There's no gore, but there is disturbing violence and crimes. I had a lot of fun with this and can see me reading more from the series. So I do, actually. I go on to read all of the books in the, what does he call it? I forget what the series is called, but it just has something to do with that they're shorts, these stories. So I gave this, I can't really say anything else because that pretty much sums it up. What happens, or how it starts off anyways. And with it being so short, I can't say anything else. So I gave this 4 stars, and I recommend it definitely for thriller lovers. I recommend all of these next books that are coming up. So the next book that I read was Nightmare. No, I didn't write this one down, but the next one that I wrote was, that I read was called Nightmare. I didn't write this down, and I cannot remember what it was, but I know that I enjoyed it and gave it either a 4 or a 5 star. Now, the next book that I read was Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Talked. Now, don't listen to this. I'm not going to say much, but, well, I don't know what I say, but just be warned that this is a weird horror, very, very, very horror-ish story. And basically what I wrote on my Goodreads page was like, how can I unread this? It's just a kind of story that I thought would stay with me and like haunt me, but it doesn't. It's gone away on me. But yeah, it was a really, I gave it a 0 because I just absolutely hated the characters, and they were just so wildly inappropriate, and the whole story is inappropriate that I just, I'm going to read you what I wrote down now. Of course, I could have given it a 5 or a 0 because it really is a well-told tale. A terribly disgusting book I could barely stomach. 2 scenes I had to close my eyes and peek through my fingers to find to find out when I could start reading again. Honestly, I would like cover my face and peek through and just kind of like skip a bit, read a couple of words. Oh, no, still going on. Skip some more, read a couple of bits, and to find out when I could start reading again. Oh, it was that bad. I knew before the first of those scenes I shouldn't be reading, but I did. And what made continue afterwards. Oh, and what made me continue afterwards was sheer determination to finish this short novella. A story of what can go horrifically wrong on the internet when a stalker finds a frail individual to play with. The author gives you a get-out-of-town card on the first page, letting us know that one woman is dead and someone is on trial for her murder. Make your decision right there, otherwise you are in for a sadist's dream. I'd prefer not to have read this, but, well, it's done. So yeah, that's how I felt about that book. If you're into BookTube, you've probably heard about it, and as I said, it's that either a 5-star or a no star. And I mean, honestly, it is a really well written and like terrifying. I don't get spooked out or grossed out or whatever at pretty much anything, because I've read so many thrillers and true crime and horror and all that kind of stuff. But this did affect me. It was like so disturbing. So if you like weird fiction and you can handle the disturbing bits, then go for it. So the next book that I read was Day by Day Armageddon. Now, I just saw that. Oh, I don't need to read you that. So yeah, the next book that I read is Day by Day Armageddon. And this is the book. This book has book 1 and book 2. Basically not a lot to say about this. It's zombie apocalypse, and it pretty much, follows that. It's a flu-like symptoms. This disease starts off, and we don't know how the disease came about. So until the end of part 2, I think, is when we start getting into that. But anyways, it is a zombie apocalypse, and it is like really, really, really good. It's not a page turner, but it's very exciting. And that I read both book 1 and I read book 1 at this point, and then at the end, the last book I read for the month was the second one. So the first one's just called Day by Day Armageddon, and the second one is called Day by Day Armageddon Beyond Exile. So yeah, if you like zombie books, zombie apocalypse, then that's a great book to read. So the next book that I read was Those Who Walk Away. Now, where did I put that? These aren't exactly in... I have 2 messages there. I need to get rid of that. Okay, so Those Who Walk Away. This is the picture that we get right here. I'm going to read what I wrote about this. I gave it a 5-star. Patricia Smith basically gets a 5-star from me all the time. So this was written in 1967 and is a suspense book. The book starts in Italy a few days after, a rich American's wife kills herself. He goes to join his father-in-law a few cities away, where he becomes aware that the father-in-law blames him for her death. And so he stays there, and he's in sort of like the expat community, and he has these dinners with the father-in-law and some other expats, and they all talk about how his wife killed herself, and about how much the father hates him. And the father is really, really, really like rude to him. He doesn't hide that he hates him, that he thinks that it's his fault, that he basically killed her. And that is what goes on for majority of the story. What did I put next? So yeah, he's so angry with the former, he insists, stepson, that he wants to actually kill him. So the writing is superb and the book is full of atmosphere. It's a slow burn, which does have a mild ending. So really the story is all about the hatred between these two. And it does have a bit of a, not a twist, but a bit of a shock, shall we say, ending. There are a couple of attempts on the man's life, and that's basically all that I am going to say. So, Patricia Highsmith, highly recommended, 5-star as usual. And then I read Dracula, and this is either the second or the third time for me in reading Dracula. Let's see, where did I put them? So I did this as a reread because of the time of year. So there's no reason to give a synopsis. Everybody knows what Dracula is about. And I really think it is my third time reading it because when I was in grade 6, I got my dad talked the librarian into giving me a supervised by him adult library card. And the first thing that I did was I got a Dracula, Frankenstein, and a book that was the complete works of H.G. Wells. It was the first thing I did. And so I read it in grade 6, and I'm positive I reread it in my 20s, and then now is my last time. So it's been quite a while, and really the first time I've read it as a mature adult. So first of all, the language is surprisingly easy for a 19th century book. It is like it could have been written today. Usually when you're reading a 19th century book, you need to read a bit to get into the style of the writing, because it's different than the way we talk. But this is really, really easy to read. And I was also amazed by just how little the Count is actually in the book. He's in the book at the beginning when Jonathan Harker is at, why am I pointing instead of coloring? at the building with him. The Count is there, and he's pretty much part of the story, but that's only the beginning. Once that part is over, we barely see the Count, if at all. I'm trying to remember if he's seen. So, it's all about the vampire hunting bit at the end, even though there really isn't that much vampire hunting in this either. It's just the story of the people, and it's creepy, and it's atmospheric, and, it's just one of the greats. It deserves to be called a classic. Oh, what else is it? So I guess in a way you could call this a melodrama because of the style of the writing, but also we could just call it a light-hearted horror. And there's a lot of heartwarming sense of family between the different men who are part of the, shall we say, Vampire Hunters. Now, I only gave it a 4 here. I think that's because when I finished reading it, I didn't feel as excited as I do when I finish reading Frankenstein. Those are both books that I've read more than twice. Oh, there's one right there that I didn't see. So, it really deserves to be a 5 because everybody should read it. If you're, even if you're not into horror, this story is gonna be melodramatic, and it's going to be the heartwarming relationship between the men who go after the Count. So then after that, I read Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendricks. And I don't need to read what I wrote about this. This is a nonfiction book right here. And it is a beautiful book. I'll show you the insides in a minute. I need to take a drink. So this is the twisted history of 70s and 80s horror fiction. And this basically goes in order from the 70s to the 80s and just really tells us about horror writing here. And it shows you the covers of the books. And of course, I was there in the 80s reading these books, also reading the 70s books in the 80s. So there's a lot of familiar, oh, no, it's not chronological, it's themes. Like this, chapter 3 is When Animals Attack. So this is about, animal horror. And just, if you're into 80s horror, or if you're like a huge horror fan, then you really do. This is like medical stuff. Like, this is a must-read for anyone who's into vintage horror, shall we say. And it's a beautiful book. So it's such a remembrance to me of seeing these covers, because, I read these versions of these books. So there was a lot more in here than what I read. So, and there was some books that I had in my mind that just weren't in the book either. So, but highly, highly recommend this book. Then the next book that I read was Elton's Brody by Edgar. Let me find it in my book. Here we are. So this is a Valancourt book, and I am kind of a collector of their books. It's by Edgar Mittelholzer, and this was written in 1960. It is a Gothic story. It's more of a novella. So let me read to you. I gave this 4 stars. With nowhere else to stay in the village, Mr. Woodsley, an artist, rooms at an elderly, eccentric lady's grand home. He finds her mildly odd, but by no means eccentric or mad, which is how she's been presented to him when people in the town were told that that's where he was staying. This quickly changes as he sees her tempers turn on a dime, and the strict rule she has of none, save the maid, of the servants are allowed upstairs, where 2 rooms have been locked off for years. After the maid has an accident and a nurse is called in, Mr. Woodsley must figure out what the sinister deeds are that the landlady is involved in. A slow burn with a rapid-fire culmination of reveals. I figured out the mystery halfway through, but still enjoyed the tale immensely, reminiscent of Shirley Jackson, wholly reminiscent of her, very atmospheric. Do you know something's going on weird with that lady, especially since she has those 2 rooms upstairs that are locked off? His room is sort of like you go up another flight of stairs to the 3rd, where the 3rd floor is basically just his room. And then so you go down the stairs, and you're at the 1st level of the upstairs, and there's a few rooms there, and there's these 2 locked ones. And so he eventually can, I'm pretty sure this is the book where he can smell some kind of scent coming from one of the rooms, and he's just dying to get in there. And So yeah, all that stuff happens at the end. Really, really good gothic tale. Highly recommend that one. And I gave it 4 stars. I'm a big 4-star giver and 3-star giver. The 5 stars has to be amazing. So that's, that's why I gave Dracula 4 stars for me. But I'd give it 5 stars if you haven't read it and you're thinking of reading it. So the next book that I read, and I've got 3 left. Let me find. There we go. So we've got Rewind by Katherine Burns. I'll read you this one. I gave it a 3. It's a thriller. It's called Rewind, and it's by Katherine. Oh no, it's not Katherine Burns. It's Katherine Ryan Howard. That's why I can't find it. So this is what this one looks like, and this was really good. Even though I gave it a 3 because it's a slow read. I don't mind slow reads, but they're not going to be 5 stars for me. Okay, so we're done with that. Let's pick up. Okay, Rewind by Katherine Ryan Howard. Famous lifestyle... Oh, yes, okay, I remember this one, but let me read it. Famous lifestyle YouTuber disappears one day, but isn't reported missing by her husband right away. So it's the family, the parents, that eventually report her missing. Unhappy with the stories she's given, disgruntled June... Okay, so now we're on to another person. Unhappy with the stories that she's getting, disgruntled junior journalist decides to follow the missing influencer's case and ends up following in her footsteps, literally, even staying in the very same cabin. Enjoyable thriller, loved the surprising conclusion, but very slow to get going and was a slow read. So that's why this got 3 points for me, is because it took a while before the story, like it was like a little boring at first, and you're kind of like, something happened, let's get going. And other than that, it was great. We start off with the woman missing, and whoops, then what's 5? Okay, then we get to following the journalist for most of the story. So she's our main character, and her boss doesn't want her doing all this stuff, but she's going down there to where this happened, and she's getting story material, so she's bringing it back to him, and eventually he's like, okay, but I'm sending someone down to be with you, more experienced one, and you guys can work together on this. So that's what they do. And then there's just a whole bunch of, it's just like huge switch around, conclusion, twists, surprising, shocking how the ending is. It's really good. I enjoyed it. But yeah, it's, it's your average thriller, what you expect from one. So I gave that 3 stars. And then the next one I read was, okay, let's get this one out of the way, and then I'll do the big one. So then I read this, which is a graphic novel called Skiz, and it's the complete collection of stories by Alan Moore. And it's a 2000 AD book, which is the company that publishes Judge Dredd. I'm really into 2000 AD, and I get a lot of comments on Goodreads of men saying, wow, you're the first woman I've heard of who likes 2000 AD. But I got when I was a kid, and my uncle would come to visit, he would always bring me a stack of 2000 AD magazines, or comic books, I should say, that he'd been saving for me. So, yeah, I read it a lot. So this is about an alien who accidentally lands on Earth and is found by some children, and then the government comes along and takes him and does experiments on him. Then he escapes, and I mean, there's no reason for me not to tell you the whole story. He escapes, and then eventually his ship comes back for him. So basically it is a retelling of E.T., except with this guy called Skiz. That's all they can get out of the sound that he says for his name. So that's what they call him. And it's really good. It's a black and white. The 2000 AD comics used to be in black and white in the day until they turned into color. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to keep it because it's not that easy a book to find. And like I said, I like 2000 AD, so this will go along with those books in my collection. And finally, the last book I read was what am I doing? Was called The Complete Published Works of H.P. Lovecraft, something like that. And it's one of those Kindle books that you can buy. So it had a zillion stories in it, and it took me September, October. So it took me just over 2 months to read it, with reading a story a day and taking a couple of days to read the novellas that were in there. And this is my first exposure to H.P. Lovecraft, except for a couple of stories here and there in collections that I would read, like horror collections. They'd include a story by him, but I always found them kind of confusing. But, you know, there's this whole mythos of the Cthulhu. I don't know how it's really pronounced, but that's what I say is Cthulhu. And I wanted to be in on it. I wanted to know what it was. And books are often called Lovecraftian, and I wanted to know what that was. And so now I do. Now I can spot when a book is Lovecraftian or follows the Cthulhu mythos. So yeah, that's why I read this, and I'm really glad that I did, because now I'm totally interested in him. And the other reason that I wanted to read him is because Batman's underworld is kind of based on the Cthulhu mythos as well. Like the area that what is it called? My mind just totally gone blank. Anyways, let me read what I put down here. It'll get all my thoughts out. So this takes a serious investment of time if you're going to read the complete works of someone. But I made it through by I did all that already. So the immersive dive into Lovecraft's works has really given me an awesome comprehension of his mythos and other worlds. At times the writing bogs down with telling us what something looks like, and he can get pretentious. So yeah, there are some stories which simply are telling. They're describing something. Like there's this one, which is a novella, and I forget what it's called. But these guys are walking through, and it's a really popular story of his, but these guys are walking through, they've made it to the ruins of where these alien creatures used to live on Earth. And they're walking around the city, and that's all it is. They're walking around the city, and he's telling them, and he tells us what they see. And that's the whole story. Nothing ever happened. And he gets into places in his writing. He gets into telling us what things look like. He does that all the time. So that's where things get bogged down a bit. And yeah, he can be pretentious. But when the atmosphere and writing mesh, more times than not, these are exciting and chilling tales of another species' way of life. So you can tell that I really enjoyed that. And that, my friends, wraps up everything that I read in the month of October. So I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed telling you. Not a lot of coloring got done, but I think more than usual. I think I'll do color by numbers when I do this because I don't have to think as much. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found some books that you hadn't heard of before. And so now I'm going to say thank you for watching, and bye!